Our bodies are hard to figure out sometimes. If you haven't been feeling well and you don't know what's causing it, or if you're trying to heal and you don't know why you're not getting better, you're not alone. But we need to know what those next right steps are, even if we are dealing with a mysterious diagnosis or confounding healing journey. I asked Andrea Nakayama to chat with me about that today. She's a functional nutritionist and founder of the Functional Nutrition Alliance. She's been a health detective for a lot of people. In this episode, you'll get answers to these questions. Where does someone start who feels like they are at the end of their rope with their health? What would Andrea consider the foundational pillars of healing? Is testing and blood work always necessary? And how can you be the expert in your own health journey? Take a listen and find your next right step. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. So this is a place where you can learn about healthy living and take the next step in your wellness journey. Andrea, thanks so much for joining the Daily Wellness Podcast.
I'm excited to be here with you, Melissa.
Yeah, tell us about yourself.
So I am a functional medicine nutritionist, so we can talk about what that means if that's of interest. I'm located in Portland, Oregon, but I work globally. I created and founded a company called the Functional Nutrition Alliance, where we train other providers, coaches, and clinicians in the science and art of the functional nutrition practice. I have over 8,000 graduates in over 68 countries. We also do have a virtual clinic at the Functional Nutrition Alliance. And meanwhile, I am also working on writing a book and my own personal writing on my own website, andreanakayama.com, which is an amalgamation of functional medicine nutrition and narrative medicine, really anchoring on the story and not just this quest for the fix that I see we can all get into. On top of that, I should probably also say I am a mom. What got me into this work was my late husband's diagnosis and death from a brain tumor. He was diagnosed when I was just 7 weeks pregnant with our first and only child, who's now 23. So my late husband he was given 6 months to live at the time of diagnosis, and he lived almost 2.5 years. So we did have some nice imprinting, some fatherly imprinting, and that experience really sparked the passion for all that I do now and all that I've built.
Yeah, you have such a powerful story.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just love that. I mean, I hate that you had to go through that, but I do love how you turned it into this amazing career that has served so many people.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's all in service to so many of the gaps that I experienced moving into the medical system with his diagnosis. We'd never experienced that in our early 30s before.
Yeah. Could you talk about that? What are some of the gaps that you saw in the system at that time?
Yeah, that was huge because, like I said, we were in our very early 30s. We had only been to the doctor for this or that, a broken arm, a sinus infection. But all of a sudden, when you have a very chronic and grave diagnosis, you are in the system. You are a part of the system and you are their property in a way. And I watched him really kind of have to recognize and accept in some ways that, but also keep his autonomy. He was such a autonomous and just intelligent person. And so the gaps were many, but the first gaps that I was exposed to were that he was treated like his diagnosis, not like the person that he was. So this recognition that everywhere we went, he was a glioblastoma multiforme. He was not Isamu Nakayama. And to me, he was my soulmate and the soon-to-be father of my child and a brother and a son and a friend and a software developer and a musician. None of that matters in the system. He is his diagnosis. Another big gap that I was aware of at that time is that every person with the same diagnosis is treated the same. So not only do we not see those differences, we don't include those differences in our treatments. So we are X for Y. That is how the system is built. And when I say all this about the medical system, I want to be clear that I'm not here to say there's something wrong with the system. It's just, it has its strengths and its benefits, but it also has its gaps. And that's why I train other providers to fill those gaps, because it's necessary. So those were the two biggest gaps. But then I just started to see more and more gaps, like the gap in care between our doctor's visits. Even when we have something chronic, there's a lot of meals, a lot of time, a lot of stress, a lot of sleep, a lot of pooping, a lot of hydration that can happen between those visits. So how do we recognize the gaps in time, the gaps in understanding? So I started to uncover lots of gaps, but those two were the ones that really struck me in those early days.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so what was that mental journey like for you to be in the midst of all of that and having all that recognition and then really changing the course of your own life to what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think very early on, there was an awareness that I had about a yes and. Like, yes, he's going to do chemotherapy and have brain surgery and do radiation. Like, we have to go through the standards of care for this diagnosis. There's also a lot of options because he was sort of a poster child at that time for this diagnosis, because at that time, this is over 20 years ago, most people with that diagnosis were older. That's since changed, but the standards of care were limited and then come down to clinical trials. We're trialing this, we're trialing that. So people were calling him from around the country trying to get him into their clinical trials. So he was researching, do I want this implant in my brain? Do I want that? Like, what are all these options? And meanwhile, I was looking at, wait a minute, I can read about the connections between sugar consumption and tumor growth. I can read about the connections between inflammation that's contributing to tumor growth and anti-inflammatory properties. So I was kind of doing this other research and bringing him, here's what I'm finding. What do you think? Do you want to? Because it was his decision and I really wanted to honor that. And of course, like, he wanted to live. He was about to be a father. He was so excited. And we just started to embrace all the other life changes, whether it was meditation, he was doing Qigong, he was going to acupuncture and massage therapy. We were going to yoga, changing our diet, prioritizing sleep. Like, we were just doing all the other things that I would now say are part of the matrix of understanding how we embrace self-care as opposed to giving it all over to the medical interventions alone.
Right. Yeah. And that's really the way it should be, right? Someone
Absolutely.
should have their options for medical interventions, but also know about all of their other options, which are so many.
Yes.
Yeah. What a beautiful thing that you guys were able to just work like a team.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I think we were so close and so conjoined as a couple anyway. And then that really, especially me being pregnant while we were going through all this, that really brought us even closer. And just for a little added irony, the trial that he did decide to go through was a high dose of the drug thalidomide. Thalidomide, if we go back in history for anybody who's my age or older, which may not be your audience, was a drug that was given in the 50s and 60s to pregnant women to prevent nausea and led to birth defects. And that's because that drug is what's called an anti-angiogenic. It strangles new blood vessels. So in an adult body that's not growing new blood vessels and new babies, it is meant to strangle the tumors that are growing. But in a body that's developing a new body, we saw birth defects due to that. So there aren't very high doses of that drug. So he had to take 24 pills with a little pregnant woman with a slash through the circle that, like, I wouldn't touch because I was a pregnant woman while he was taking those 24 pills every day.
Wow. Then did you have your own health struggles at any time?
So the reason why it was easy for me to turn to nutrition, and this is all before I was a nutritionist, so my career change didn't happen until after Isamu passed away, and I realized this was my calling. But I always had a real passion for food and for cooking. We had like these elaborate dinner parties. We lived in the Bay Area at the time and shopping at the farmer's market. And I was already struggling with what I can now look back on and say were the beginnings of my autoimmune journey, but I didn't know it at that time. So it just felt like inflammation. It might have been inflammation in my face, or my body feels a little puffy. I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I was doing this dance that many of your listeners will probably relate to, where I was trying to see with the foods I was eating what makes me feel better, what makes me feel worse. So I was already kind of playing in this world of nutrition and herbs and trying to manage my own inflammation. I will say we changed our diet pretty extensively while I was pregnant, and I felt great, but I also it was not a priority to focus on all the niggling signs and symptoms when there was so much going on for him. So even if I look back and think about my nausea in early pregnancy and how debilitating it felt when we were in the hospital and he's being diagnosed with a brain tumor and like vomiting because of that nausea was just like really insignificant. So it was a really interesting awareness for me to realize where a symptom in my own body can be so consuming.
Yeah.
And then switch when like it's manageable and that's bigger.
Yeah. I think you were sharing about your autoimmune journey.
Yeah. I have Hashimoto's. That is, knock on wood, very well managed now. That is definitely a genetic predisposition, which is one of the 3 roots that I say is always present in any chronic condition. And for me, it was really just that niggling inflammation that I was experiencing that I couldn't put a label on, whether it felt like there was a padding over my body, whether my face was inflamed, my breasts would get really tender, like so my little boy at that time would hug me and it would be painful. And so I was just trying to figure out, it was actually figuring out my mom's autoimmunity that then led me to going, wait a minute, I think this is what's going on for me. And at that point, again, I wasn't even a practitioner yet. I just had the interests and was wondering, wait a minute, why is her thyroid medication not working? What's going on for her? Are we asking the right questions? Should we be going somewhere different? That led me to, oh, you have Hashimoto's, not hypothyroidism. And wait a minute, I think I have Hashimoto's too.
Wow.
That then became an expertise of mine. But at that early stage, just a discovery.
Yeah. You mentioned the 3 roots. What would you say that all 3 of them are?
Yeah. So I have a model. I have a lot of models that I teach into in functional nutrition. But one of them is what I call 3 roots, many branches. So if we take a moment and think of any sign, symptom, or diagnosis, those are branches. So whether it's my thyroid or, PMS or puffy eyes or restless leg or bloating, those are branches. So helping us to realize that oftentimes we're looking for the fix for the branch. But if we go deeper to the roots, there's never one root. So a lot of people are looking for the root, but the 3 roots of any chronic condition are the genes, digestion, and inflammation. And then what I teach into is that it's not just the roots, it's then the soil that those roots live in. And each of those roots has what I call a circle of influence, or the soil, 4 factors that allow us to think more deeply about each of those roots so we know where to focus our attention, as opposed to this like endless quest that so many people are on to just feel better.
Yeah, which is one thing I really wanted to pick your brain about, because like I feel like I have so many friends, and I'm sure like in your line of work, like you must have so many clients that come to you that are really just super confused about what is going on with their bodies. Maybe they feel bad and they don't know what it is, or they kind of know what it is and they've been trying all the right things, quote unquote, to fix it and it's not working. And so they're just really at a loss, So just people at a loss in general with their health. Like, is this kind of where you go to with them?
Yeah, we definitely have to think through a more systematic lens. So I'm going to just back up and say, when we define what a functional practice truly is, functional medicine and functional nutrition, there are three primary tenets. And I have a lot of threes because it's easy to remember and it helps us to think differently about how we're pursuing these things that we're trying to fix in ourselves. So the three tenets of a truly functional practice are a therapeutic partnership, looking for the roots, and a systems-based approach. A therapeutic partnership means that there are two people that are experts in any therapeutic or clinical relationship. I have my expertise in functional nutrition. The doctor may have their expertise in medicine, but only I have expertise in me. Mm-hmm. And the more I understand what's going on in my body by tracking, by listening, by asking myself questions, the better partner I'm going to be in that situation. And I think patients are getting so overwhelmed with all the noise we have available to us that we're going in with the wrong set of questions. We're trying to be in somebody else's expertise instead of in our expertise. So let me just bring that home as an example. If you're going in and saying, doctor, I have these signs and symptoms, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. Number one, separate your signs and your symptoms. So your symptoms are the things you feel that they can't measure. Your signs are the things they can measure. So if you're unconscious, they got your signs. They know if you have a temperature, a rash, they can measure those things. Your symptoms are yours. Fatigue, a headache, they can't measure those. Separate those and then know more information about your symptoms. So if you're saying, hey, doc, I'm constipated. I noticed it started during my second pregnancy. It gets better when, it gets worse when. That way, I'm bringing my expertise to the table. So that's number one. Number two is really just when we're showing up in that therapeutic partnership, recognizing that we have a part to play, that we can't expect everything from our doctor. A lot of things I hear, and I'm sure you hear this, is I wish my doctor understood that diet makes a difference. Why? You don't consult them about your toothpaste, toilet paper you're buying. Like, it's just not their expertise. So know that you can develop expertise in what makes you feel better and what makes you feel worse. In functional medicine, we call these mediators, and not rely on them to be your be all and end all. They are there for a purpose, and that purpose is important. But we can't rely on them to be our gods to tell us all the things to do. That's where we need to tune in. Yeah. So therapeutic partnership, looking for the roots, back to those three roots, and a systems-based approach. And you've talked about this on the podcast. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Systems biology is at the core of a truly functional practice. And it helps us understand that everything in the body is connected. Yeah. Your mood is connected to your gut. Your hormones are connected to your liver, which is connected to your gut. It's all connected in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love all of that. I really appreciate what you said about you bringing the expertise about yourself, because people need to hear that, because we're not told that. We're actually made to believe the opposite, I think. Like, we're told that, we're not the experts. We just need to listen and do.
Yes.
And, that we are taught really just to doubt ourselves and to question ourselves and not like actually speak up for ourselves.
Yeah, self-gaslighting. We're like overriding our...
True.
Yeah.
And if people can really grasp that, I think that alone can be life-changing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what was your journey, kind of thinking through all of these things that you just shared in your Hashimoto's, getting that into where you are now in this place of remission?
Yeah. So when I talk about those 3 roots, another 3 that I want to anchor on that relates to what I did is what I call the 3 tiers of nutrition mastery. Lots of 3s.
I like it.
So tier number 1 are the non-negotiables. Tier number 2 is deficiency to sufficiency. And tier number 3 is dismantling dysfunction. Dismantling dysfunction is what our doctors do. You bring them the problem, they want to address that problem. It's a branch, right? What we do in functional nutrition is focus on tier 1 and tier 2 in order to address tier 3. So instead of coming at it directly, we are nourishing the soil. So let's go back to tier 1, non-negotiables. Within the non-negotiables, I'll give you another 3. I have a non-negotiable trifecta, which is sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance. We are not paying attention to those things, and we're looking for solutions that are at that tier 3. So let's say I'm having hormone issues, very common, of all different sorts.
Yes.
We go tier 3, fix this. But the truth is, if we pay attention to our sleep, our poop, and our blood sugar balance, we have begun the resolution. Mm-hmm. And this is where I always understood my scope and recognized those gaps that we started out with and focused my attention on the things that I could do to enable change to occur, as opposed to thinking I was going to have a quick fix, or this supplement that's worked for Dr. So-and-so on Instagram is going to work for me. I focused on that soil, always nourishing that arena. And that makes it easier for me to develop my expertise because I'm not trying to sit in somebody else's expertise.
Yeah, I think that is not the easy way, right? We're used to the easy, convenient way, but it's so much more empowering.
It's empowering, but it's also more effective because I feel like what happens when we're chasing those quick fixes is we get stuck in a very sympathetic, dominant fight or flight response, questing for the fix. Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Is it that person? Is it this person? Is it this protocol? Do I need to eat like that? This dietary theory, they're intermittent fasting. They've got ketogenic. They're taking magnesium. What kind of magnesium? Like it's this constant quest that we're on that is actually not allowing for healing to occur. We cannot heal when the body is in fight or flight. And oftentimes when we're looking for resolutions to chronic health issues, we are putting ourselves in that state of fight or flight instead of rest and digest, sleep, poop, blood sugar balance. If we can focus on those things, just even ask yourself questions. What does she mean by poop? Am I pooping every day? Am I feeling good about my poop every day? We start to bring a different level of awareness to our own body and our own body's needs that really can make a difference and bring us into that, you know what? The noise is the noise, and I'm here to tune into my body.
Yeah. Of those 3 things, could you speak on the blood sugar balance a little bit and how that really promotes healing?
Yeah. So for when we look at the baseline or the structure of all health issues, we have to think about what the cores are, what's at the roots that really helps us to build upon things. So blood sugar imbalances can lead to a lot of inflammation. They can lead to a lot of other hormone issues. I'll just talk about hormones as an example. So I always think of a hormone pyramid. And the base of that pyramid is blood sugar balance. If we move up, we get to insulin, and then cortisol, and then thyroid, and then our sex hormones. Oftentimes, we're looking for the solve for our thyroid or our adrenals or our sex hormones, but we haven't established what's going to allow for those other interventions to actually work. So I want to get practical when it comes to blood sugar balance, because this then becomes something that people are like, how do I know? What do I do? How do I know? Like, just first of all, tune into how you feel in a day. I like to use a food, mood, poop journal for folks that are fine tracking. Not everybody is comfortable tracking their food. But the mood category, I'm going to put in air quotes, and that's any sign, symptom, or diagnosis that, or any sign or symptom that you're experiencing. The diagnosis doesn't fit there. I'm so used to saying those three together. Any sign or symptom is your quote unquote mood. And so when we are experiencing something through the day and we're not looking for an answer, just track to put information down on paper. You're not like analyzing. But you may realize then where you have lacking energy, weight. I notice that when I eat this for breakfast, I'm fine till lunch. But when I eat this for breakfast, I'm hungry at 10:30. Whatever you can see after you've collected 3 to 5 days, if that's...
Would that be things like irritability, impatience, like all of those kind of things as well?
Yeah, but also joint pain, bloating. Like, so mood, again, is very broad in that it could be your mental health mood, like irritability, but it could also be anything you're feeling in your body. I'm using that word mood, like just more broadly. And then we start to experiment and play. Again, what happens if I try 3 different breakfasts? Do I notice any difference with that crashing that I'm experiencing? Or wait a minute, I skipped lunch because the kids needed XYZ, and then I had no energy to make dinner. Let me try now making lunch or making sure I have something for lunch. And then I can talk about 3 dietary principles that take us out of the dietary theories that support that blood sugar balance without us having to measure, track. I'm all for measuring and tracking and lab testing. I know it was one of your questions, when we need it. But we're often getting it at the wrong time and for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I was curious about that. Like, I'm thinking as you work with people, like, how do you really know what they need? Does that come from testing and but I'm also seeing, now I'm getting part of my answer here. It's like, I'm seeing that you're really having people just tune into themselves.
Yeah, it's a both and. So we do really detailed assessments. So functional nutrition, the way I teach it, really anchors on what I call the art of the practice. And art stands for assess, recommend, track, repeat. Art, right? We do not diagnose, we're not prescribing, but our deep assessments allow us to know you better, allow you to know you better. And based on that, we're making recommendations. So for me, anybody who's making dietary or supplement recommendations on a podcast or on a summit or in a blog article, that's not functional because that's not based on your needs. And that's where we're introducing a lot of confusion, not just in the mind of the patient, but in the body of the patient, because people are self-diagnosing and self-prescribing things that may not be appropriate for them. So our assessment is really, really deep and allows us to see the whole and then make recommendations that are appropriate for that time. I love certain testing. I love regular old serum blood tests. For most of the clients that we see in our clinic, I would like serum tests at the get-go because these people have been there and done that. So I want to see a baseline. But a lot of what's called functional testing or the specialty testing, some of it I don't think is necessary, and others I think are necessary when we need more information. I love a Dutch test. I don't need a Dutch test if somebody's not eating breakfast and then eating McDonald's at 3:00 and then staying up till 12. I don't need a Dutch test. Like, there's no need for the money for Dutch testing at that stage.
They have to get those foundational things in line first.
Exactly.
Right?
And I need to see what changes. Are we able to track and see that symptoms resolve before we rush to testing that's not meant for diagnostic purposes? A lot of that testing isn't about a diagnosis. It's about clues, and we're using it wrong because we're applying conventional thinking to functional methodologies.
Yeah, so wise. Love that. So what would you recommend for people that are in that space of being kind of lost in their health journey? What are some of the first steps that you would recommend they take?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to get back to our non-negotiables. I said sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance, right, as a non-negotiable trifecta. But we also all know some of our non-negotiables. My non-negotiables include making time to write and connecting with my partner and going to dance class and getting out in nature. Like those things actually feed my health. And making time for me knowing my non-negotiables helps me with a very key area in functional medicine that we call our mediators. What makes me feel better? What makes me feel worse? Start there. It's one of the big questions we'll ask in an intake session. What do you know makes you feel better? What do you know makes you feel worse? That's the greatest place to start because we come in with some self-informed data about ourselves and we can get curious. I'm all about slowing it down to speed it up. Actually get to the goal faster when we slow the roll and take that time to really anchor on the things that matter to us.
I love that. Yeah. So, I mean, the kind of standard things that are good for everyone, but then the individual things that are going to apply to everyone uniquely.
Yeah. And what does that even mean? Good for everyone. Like this is the difference between nutrition and functional nutrition. We can say coffee, good or bad, red wine, good or bad, broccoli, good or bad, grains, right? Like that's nutrition. It exists outside the body. And what I'm asking us to do is say, where does that food or lifestyle or whatever meet your physiology? And then what can you tune into there so that we're not bought into these things that take away our agency of what you said so well, that self-knowing that we're told to ignore. We don't have gut feeling anymore. This is called interoception. We've lost it. We've lost interoception, perception that is internal, feeding our understanding.
That's awesome. What if someone wants to get connected to your clinic or work with your team? What would be the process for that?
Yeah, so I'm going to send everybody to andreanakayama.com. That's the easy place to go. You can get on my newsletter. That writing is for the individual who's sick and not getting better. I'm not offering clinical support there. I'm offering the reframe that will ultimately be in my book. And I also offer narrative medicine workshops there, which allow us to come into our story and that slow down a little bit, that deep listening. That will also lead you back to the Functional Nutrition Alliance, where I train practitioners and where we have a clinic. I don't work with very many patients personally anymore, so those are a select few, but I have a team that does see clients and patients, and all of that can be found at fxnutrition.com. But again, if you go to Andrea Nakayama and all the web places, Andrea Nakayama, it will lead you back to the Functional Nutrition.
We'll get connected. Yeah. And when are you expecting your book to come out?
Oh my gosh. I have a very patient publisher that has been patient with me finding this next version of my voice. So I'm going to say it's probably not till 2026.
Yeah.
But the work is evolving and I'm excited for that evolution and not just writing another 10 tips to 8 fixes for book, which I'm just not interested in.
Yeah. I think that's going to be amazing. I'm so glad that you're using your voice to help people in that way. And I know that you have done so much work, like in all of your learning and all of your practice, your life experiences, and you're not just going to use that in your clinic anymore, but you're going to have this book that is really your voice to the world. So I'm super excited.
Thank you.
Be watching for that.
Yeah, hopefully a workbook for everybody to really take this to practice too. Yeah. Thank you so much for those.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So nice to be with you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.